Hi, I'm Dan Margulis. Welcome to the first of two videos aimed at advanced Photoshop users on a topic that is somewhat misleadingly presented by Kelby Training because it doesn't really reflect the agenda of what I'm about to teach. As an introduction, I would like you to think back to a rather unhappy time, namely the early 1990s when I started to play around with Photoshop seriously in preference to very expensive equipment that was then called high-end. So this was a time of 300 megabyte disk drives that cost $2,000. This was a time of 8 megabyte RAM costing $1,000. It was a time of very expensive film-only cameras. It was a time where everything depended on the scanner operator, and Photoshop operators and photographers also were at the mercy of that luminary. And generally, it was a time when everything was very expensive and slow, and Photoshop didn't even have layers. That, of course, was a very unhappy time, and things have gotten much better since then in all respects except one, and that is the originals have gotten worse. The originals today are worse than they were 15 years ago. Certain wise people predicted this trend, although other people said it wouldn't happen. When I did the first edition of Professional Photoshop in 1994, I said, this is going to happen. Everybody else said no. So in 1998, in the second edition, I was able to say, I told you so, in the following eloquent words. I said, of all the assertions I made in the first edition of this book, one of the most roundly criticized was a statement to the effect that the typical originals we work with would get worse. But scanners are getting better, I was assured, and people are getting more knowledgeable about Photoshop. It's true enough, but 4 years later, we're working with worse originals nonetheless. It's become so cheap to work with color that many color projects are initiated on a shoestring budget. Professional photographers are busy, but a smaller percentage of the images we work with are in fact shot by professionals. Cheap stock photography is a wonderful innovation, but the technical quality of the images is, shall we say, somewhat variable. Sub $1,000 digital cameras are improving rapidly, but are as yet well short of traditional quality standards. I've been teaching hands-on classes in color correction for several years. 4 years ago, students would complain that the practice images were unreasonably bad, not representative of the challenges they would encounter in the real world. Nowadays, using the same images, I more frequently hear that these images are unrealistically good in comparison to the ones that the students make their money working on. Until you've worked on really poor originals, I said, you don't realize how much power Photoshop has. And just as a reminder, that's written in 1998, but it's just as true today as it was then. The trend has continued. More and more, we're likely to find images destined for the highest quality uses shot by amateurs. I guess we can understand why, because 15, 16 years ago, it was so expensive to get color into a working order that you would not ordinarily put anything but a very good photograph into the workflow. But today, clients expect the work to be done for free. So they don't much care. They give us something bad to work with, and we're supposed to make it look good. Now, it turns out that a lot of the lessons that we get from working with bad originals apply very much to good originals as well. And so it's very much worth the study of bad originals, because so often we look at something that looks good and we say, well, that's good enough. Why should we do anything? Why should we be aggressive in any way? Whereas if we're confronted with something that's obviously bad, we say, okay, well, we're going to have to do something. Maybe it'll make it look better and maybe it won't, but we can't sit still and accept what we've got. So this session will be examining what makes an original bad. Not from the standpoint of how it was photographed, but how the digital file is. If you want to have a lesson on how to shoot a bad photograph, I'm really the right guy to teach it. But this is color correction, it's not photography. So we're going to be studying the bad originals, what makes them bad, and what are the likely ways to make them better, and how would that apply to a good original.